Namaste, and welcome to another episode of the Vichaar Manthan Sustainable Narratives podcast. Quite interested today and quite excited to be introducing you to the political economy panel discussion taking place, which is titled, How Do We Democratise Capital? Now, if you haven't registered yet for the conference, you need to go onto vichaarmanthan.org and register for your very exclusive ticket to this conference. It's not available on YouTube, it's not available on other platforms. You have to register to AirMeet to join in the discussion, where there will also be networking opportunities. Today, we're bringing Ravi Lakhani, who is studying his master's at London Business School and also works in private equity. Today, he's going to tell us a little bit more about this particular panel discussion, why this vertical is important, and who we're going to be listening to. Raviji, welcome back to the podcast.
So, Vijay, it's good to be back. Hopefully it's as interesting as it was last time.
I think so. And Raviji's mentioning last time as the Vichaar Manthan podcast we recorded called Dharmic Wealth. So I'll drop a link below if you haven't listened to that. It was a conversation we had at detail around wealth and why wealth is important to society. But today, Ravi, we're talking about political economy. So just top level, for those that maybe don't know why political economy is important to them, could you highlight that for a moment? And I think we'll get into the topic.
Absolutely. So political economy fundamentally is economics, what we will be familiar with in school, universities, and economics professorships all the way up. And why it's so important is there's so many narratives floating about in the space of, oh, the rich are super rich, there's growing inequality, we should revolt, capitalism is bad, we should throw out the whole system of capitalism. The government, on the other side, the government shouldn't be intervening at all, taxes are too high, why is the government printing money, or we should have austerity. There's so many narratives and nuances going on in this. So to understand and really get a grasp of how this is affecting us, but also understand the reality of the situation and start to navigate these things to become better for society and better for us as individuals.
Sure. Thank you for highlighting that. And if we get into the topic, right, democratizing capital. Now, I don't know the exact statistics, but private wealth globally is in the trillions, I think 130 trillion plus. And then
we're looking at
135 trillion, right? And the wealthiest 1% control 40% of that wealth. I mean, sounds like a bit of an imbalance.
Yeah. I mean, these are the figures that are often quoted. So in the UK, we'll have charities like Oxfam who quote the top 1% of the UK owns this much wealth and the bottom 50% owns this much. But I think these figures, to be honest, are a bit misleading. Although at first glance, it makes it seem like, oh, there's so much inequality.
True.
But let's look at that. So the bottom 50% of the world in terms of wealth is going to be in developing nations. Most of these people don't own anything, right? So you've got billions of people on the planet that don't own anything. So the fact that the top 1% are worth as much as a villager in Africa, I mean, it's not surprising. This is not some groundbreaking magic statistic that should blow our minds. That's number one. And number two is, well, why is it like that? And do we see these patterns elsewhere, right? So the classic example given here is Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, and Rafa Nadal, maybe one or two other tennis players, have probably got 90% of the Grand Slams in the past 10 years. Right? Does that mean that the tennis system is totally unequal, corrupt, broken?
Interesting.
Well, no, there's clearly some nuance here. Now, I'm not saying inequality is the best thing on the planet and, we should have lots of poor people. No, but this is not a nuanced narrative. This is not a new idea. We should be looking at other things. Are the people in the bottom of our society being uplifted, being given the opportunity to earn more money, to save more money? Are they being educated? What does their standard of living look like? This top line narrative that we see, to be honest, it's not particularly compelling, it's not particularly new, and it doesn't give us any sort of information that we can do something about.
Fair point. And the nuance of that is what's important. Do tell us more. This is riveting.
Yeah, so I think a good thing to understand and why we're talking about democratizing capital is what we're saying is capital makes things happen. So if Sumitji, if you or one of our podcast audience members wants to start a business, let's say, so you got a bike on your wall, they want to start a bike business, right? They're selling bike. They need capital to make that happen. So they can get that from themselves. They might have saved, they might have earned money. They can get it from their friends or family. They can borrow it from a bank or an institution. And that's what's going to allow them to go and buy bikes, make them, build them, and sell them. So capital has allowed for that business to
For
be
sure,
started.
maybe through a business loan or some type of system or scheme. And you know, you're talking about sort of business, but there's also like residential, homing, mortgages, that entire sector too. And actually beyond that, at an individual level, the way you can invest, make investments, ISAs, that whole
Investments
setup.
all the way up to infrastructure, right? To build a road, we need capital to do that. To build a school, we need capital to do that. So not, you know, money makes the world go around, but really we should start saying capital makes the world go around. So this is what's interesting. And so who owns that capital? How are they allocating that capital? And how do we make that capital work for the benefit of everyone is a sort of fundamental question we're looking at in this panel discussion.
Sure.
And what's interesting when you dive into it is it becomes very clear that actually some things that at the top level that would be instantly, this makes sense, are actually counterproductive. So I'll give you an example. So it seems like, great, 2 years ago, Eric Lonergan, he suggested that maybe a percentage of our tax should be saved by the government, not spent every year, and they form a nice little fund that gets invested every year.
Wow.
Right? And
great idea.
they use the money to reduce the amount of taxes, A, we have to pay, and B, they allocate it to, you know, infrastructure, roads, building, schools, and education.
And that would make sense.
Sounds like a fantastic idea. Right, totally. Here's the problem with it. Number one, we generally are in a budget deficit, so we're spending more than we're taxing. So where are you going to get this buffer from? Number two, the government, let's say the government sets up a fund. Now, if I have the savings that I didn't pay my taxes, I get to choose where it goes. Maybe it goes to buying a new car. Maybe it goes, I'll invest it, like you said. Maybe I have cancer and next year I want to blow it on a trip around the world. Now, if the government has taxed that money and it's theirs, it's their decision to make what happens with that.
Sure.
Right? So that's the first thing.
And so,
I don't no longer have control of that.
right, control.
Right? Right? The second bit is who is actually investing that money. So if we look at the top managed funds in England, in America, anywhere, the guys and ladies that are managing these funds are paid millions. And why are they paid millions? It's because they're paid based on performance. Now, if I'm going to ask our top managers, you know, you had Yajur Hariya on here a week ago or so. If I want to incentivize him, I can't pay him a low salary, right?
Sure.
I have to incentivize him on performance. We all know the Wall Street bonuses, what they look like. Now, I, as a taxpayer, I'm going to get a bit annoyed if with my money, you're paying somebody £4 million bonuses. But if you are not, you're not going to get the best fund managers. And also what's going to happen is these fund managers, they're going to be allocating billions of pounds. They're going to be tempted to go, you know, my buddy Sumit, he's starting a bike company. I'm going to fund some innovation and some small and medium-sized enterprise. Why? Because they're not aligned. What happens in the growth of this money is not, they don't care. There's no reason for them to care. So an idea, again, that seems, oh yeah, this makes so much sense. Once you dig into what does that look like in reality, it's not really democratic. The people have lost control of that money, right? And the reality is you end up with a bunch of sort of not warpings, but sort of misalignments in the market.
True.
Distortions.
Wow. I think I love the way you just sort of paint the real detail of the scenario in front of us. It's not as simple as it's unfair or the money or the wealth, but really the nuanced discussion. There's several layers to it, and they all have equal merit and understanding to understand the impact of the ideas and the constructs within them and how it affects us as society individually as a whole. And I think what I got from the story of the guy with cancer is that the money that's now gone doesn't affect him today, rather people that will come beyond them. And how do we think as a society about what's important? Is it just here now, us, me, I, or is it everyone, everything flourishing beyond my lifetime for generations to come? A sustainable idea.
Sure.
Wow.
But this needs a new answer. It can't be, let's give it to the government. The government, again, why the government's incentive, what are they incentivized for? Well, to look after the public to some extent, enough that they get voted back in. But apart from that, they're made up of people like you and I. So this blind idea also needs to be questioned. If I just give it to the government, they'll sort it. That's not fair on the government, and it's not correct. The responsibility is on us as individuals to invest our money in a sustainable way to start thinking broader.
So right now in the UK, where a recession is looming, there is a cost of living crisis. Even in the last 10, 15 years, we've had a previous crash of the world economy. Things from a money perspective and economics perspective don't sound right. There's unrest and protests in the world today. And I think a lot of it, apart from sort of, all this identity crisis and all that type of stuff, from a financial perspective, there's a fundamental split between reward and capital.
Oh,
Has
okay.
this
It's
happened
an
before?
interesting question.
Has this happened before? What happened in the world, in society when this happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of bits. So, narratives are now so important that some of this protesting is rather ideologically driven as opposed to the economic reality.
Sure.
The boom and bust cycle and the sort of, I'd say perhaps the stagnation that we're about to enter is immensely tough. And again, the answers may be on the other side of where we think they are, in that governments trying to get involved and do austerity and print money may be sometimes counterproductive. It's a little tough. Printing money has if you come from the Friedman School of Economics, printing money is the single most obvious cause of inflation.
Okay.
So then being massively surprised at the level of inflation we have a year after we've done some of the biggest QE packages we've ever seen is just nonsense. We are not surprised. The government is not surprised that this inflation came along. Okay. And the second part that you touched on, which is a really interesting question, is you said, if I got it right, is what is the reward for capital, right? And that's a really interesting question. It's not asked an awful lot. So if we look at history, it seems that the modern idea is that the reward split of profit between capital and labor has been pretty flat. But that's not true. That's not true. It seems to vary between sort of 60-40 split. So 60% of the profits going to the capital and 40 being paid to labor, all the way up to sort of 80-20, and now maybe tipping a little bit beyond that. And there's various causes of this, but the important thing is that there is a balance point. Once it goes too far towards capital and not enough towards labor, people will no longer provide their labor. So we're seeing, I can't remember what it's called. It's not a recruitment crisis, but it's sort of quiet quitting, I think is the term that's
Quitting. I've
used.
heard about this. So not only is there a talent shortage and there's not enough people to do the work, but those that are working are now not doing more than they, the details of it miss me.
And why is that? I mean, you're talking to so many people. What pulse are you getting? Why people are doing this?
I don't think within my circles and communities and industries, quiet quitting is a thing. I don't think it's there.
I'd be surprised if it isn't.
Wow, maybe I haven't seen it. Maybe I'm fortunate to work somewhere where the culture is great and I'm rewarded fairly and treated like a human and we have human aspects. But I do know of the story around some quiet quitting where it's like, I'm only going to turn up at 9 o'clock. I'm only going to do work that's allocated to me. I'm not going to go beyond my means. I'm not going to work into my lunch break. I'm not going to do any overtime. I'm going to leave bang on 5 o'clock. I only care about work while I'm there 9 to 5 and will do no more. I put no more effort than is what is minimally required. And that is tragic. You don't get anywhere in life.
Well, is it?
Like
No,
that.
no, no,
yes,
no.
I think
no,
so.
I don't think that's fair. I'll tell you why, and then we'll let our listeners decide. So
Fine.
I've spoken to a few people, and it's this idea of, look, I've got a degree. Some people have masters, and then they go in and they feel underpaid, undervalued, micromanaged, like they don't have freedom, right? And like they don't have sort of
So
agency
is that
over
the
the work
system's
that they
fault
do.
or that in one
No,
employer?
wait. And as a company, we're expecting these people to turn up motivated and do amazing things and innovate. But why? And the thing is that as a worker, I can turn up 9 to 5 and get paid the same as Sumit, who sat next to me, who's putting his life's work into this, right? Now, here's the thing. Let's talk about democratizing capital. So what happens, let's say, when I am given shares in the company I work for?
You're
Right?
bought
What
into the
happens is
success of the company. You're part of the mission.
bought into this. Right. And if I work really hard, I come up with an innovative idea, people should start to listen to it, where the workers are involved. And if the profits go up, I benefit from that very directly. very directly. So maybe there's a space here for, worker-owned enterprise to some degree,
Sure. There are
right? There's been
organizations
a
that
few
do that today.
experiments. Yeah, there's the co-op in the UK, sort of very famous. There's a couple of mines in the southern part of North America. So we're still talking about the USA, that were done as experiments during Roosevelt's sort of term. And they're still active today. They're doing incredibly well as businesses. They're
I,
100%
I've
worker
worked
owned.
I've worked for a great company who has a share incentive scheme. So obviously you're a part of that success, and I think lots of companies do that. But
Yeah,
are they the few? Are
there's a
they not? Is
balance.
that not the standard? And even if it
It's
is,
getting more popular for
right?
those who understand, but the challenge here is people are not stupid, right? So if I work for a company and they're like, we'll
Oh
give you
yeah,
one
of
share
course.
and one share is worth 5p, people get even more disillusioned. And I've seen it happen in two or three big companies, FTSE
And
100 companies.
so
People will
that's
be
why they
even more
scream against capitalism.
miffed.
That's why they want a new system.
Yeah, and the question is, what do you want more? Do you want to deal with your access to funds, your access to a satisfying job? Do you want to deal with inequality, or do you really want to bin capitalism? And the question then is why, on
Fine,
these
okay.
narratives.
Like a system like
Uh,
that can't change overnight. Is there a transitionary period, or is it always just evolving and changing? Are we able to influence that system?
well, I'd say it starts with the fundamentals at the individual level of really understand capitalism first and what is going on within it, right? Capitalism has been responsible for 150 years of some of the most peaceful, low crime, highest innovation, highest increase in education levels, literacy, highest levels of wealth generation for the sort of bottom quartile of our society that we've ever seen in human history.
Uh,
So
uh,
throwing out the baby with the bathwater
sure. No,
is
fair
is
point.
silly.
Uh, Nuance for sure. Are the people not able to feel the impact of the value they think they should be getting? Is the return or the satisfaction spread out for too long? Do people just want immediate gratification, pay, whatever it looks like in this system, do you think? Or just generally as a society? Is our value
Maybe,
system compromised?
maybe. I think it's an interesting conversation to be had. And I was talking to David Halpin, he's one of the other speakers. He's talking on the myth of, markets panacea, on another fireside. And he was saying that part of the immigrant generation that came over in the 70s were materialists. So they valued safety and security of job, a good income, high savings rates, buying property, buying the house that they lived in, um, having a car, wearing good, smart clothes. And then we've got our generation that has grown up, let's say, with a bit more security. You know, yes, we want good
More
jobs, but
freedom
most of us have
also,
good jobs.
freedom and innovation
Exactly.
to time to
And
do sort of other things.
now we want these things. So he's calling us post-materialists. It's not his term. Um, it's because we have the material wealth. So now we're looking for value. And the question now for our generation is going to be, great, you're looking for value. What are your values? And how much are your values worth? Right. And we'll be talking about this in what is money and the nature of money in the fireside. But it's, okay, you're saying you want sustainability and income inequality, but do you want it enough not to buy that jumper from some, I'm not going to name companies, but companies that name it, that make their
A fashionable brand.
garments child labors? Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't
okay.
want to get cancelled, but yeah, do you value it enough to pay an extra tenner for something sustainable? Do you value it enough not to buy new clothes every 3 months?
And
Are you
upcycle or
okay going around with the
recycle
same
or
jumper?
yeah.
Right. So you want these values, but what are your values? And how much do you really value them? To what extent? Are you willing to sacrifice 10 grand a year for your values? Are you willing to put money behind your values? And
Could you give up
that's
1%
going
of
to
your
be the
wealth
test for our
for an
generation.
idea?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I
Exactly.
think, look, we're diving really deep into this. I'm loving the conversation, but just a reminder for everyone listening, this is talking about in the political economy vertical. This is talking about democratizing capital, which is a panel discussion at Vichaar Manthan Sustainable Narratives conference, literally next week. So if you haven't signed up yet, you need to go to vichaarmanthan.org, register for your exclusive ticket, and listen in on all of the panel discussions and fireside conversations and podcasts that are being released. Today, we're speaking to Ravi G. Lakhani about the panel discussion he is hosting called How Do We Democratize Capital? Raviji, thank you so far for introducing us to this topic. Is there a particular question or thought or something our listeners and guests could have a think about before they arrive at this panel discussion at the conference next week?
Yeah, there's two things I'd want them to ask. So one is, with your money and where you're investing it, is it aligned with your value system? And the reason I'm asking that is ideas like impact investing and ESG are on the rise, environmental, social governance factors. But the question is whose value system is that? So if I want to invest in ESG friendly companies, it has to be rubber stamped by someone else. And that carries certain caveats, right? What do you mean by environmentally sustainable? What do you mean by governance? And sometimes the standards and values that are applied to this may not match up to our own value systems. So in this idea of democratizing capital, we also have to know where our capital is being allocated to, and not necessarily allow these value systems, which are, let's say, inherently undemocratic, just be imposed willy-nilly. We should question them, right? And the second question is, what would our audience think about if Britain had a sovereign wealth fund? And this is quite a tough question.
Okay.
Right. So Britain has North Sea gas. It has a bunch of national assets. And a classic example is Norway. So Norway, with all of their oil that they sell, all that money goes into a fund, and it's managed, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. And basically, when you retire in Norway, you're a millionaire by default because the government has invested that money and will allocate it to you as an income.
Wow.
Right. In Finland, you get given a house. So you don't have to have any income. You don't need to own your own property when you retire. You'll get given a house and an income.
Interesting.
Right? So is this something that British people, our audience, are interested in? And that, again, a little bit of a different angle on this, it's different around the world. So in Singapore, they have a sovereign wealth fund. It's not managed as well. But people are encouraged more to save on their own, right? So when you retire, by that time, you'll probably have your own property. And now remember, you retain control of what you do with that money, right? It's not the government paying you an income. You have enough invested to pay you an income. So which do our audience prefer would be an interesting one.
Fantastic
really.
Questions. Great level of detail there. Thank you so much. And thank you once again for introducing us to this panel discussion. I implore everyone to tune in to listen to this. It affects us all. It affects everyone for generations to come. And it's important decisions and discussions that we can be a part of. The whole premise of Vichaar Manthan is to bring these ideas together and churn them to see what we get out. And what is that special something? What are the learnings? What are the outputs of that? Would be amazing to see. I am ever so interested in this. So thank you once again, Raviji, for joining us. And to everyone at home, please do register vichaarmanthan.org. And if you are interested in conversations like this, why don't you tune into the Vichaar Manthan podcast? Subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite streaming platform. And all the panel discussions, fireside, book clubs that Vichaar Manthan has on. You can have a look at vichaarmanthan.org. Thank you once again for listening. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon. Thank you and namaste.